Welcome, my friends, to our series on Mercury in the 12 houses of the horoscope. I'm just so glad that you've joined me for this series. This information is coming to you from my Royal Stars Academy course in astrology, and you can learn astrology there with me at any time you like, or if you prefer, you can do one of my short courses at the Learn Astrology page of my website. And now, without any further ado, let's look straight at Mercury. We know that Mercury is the planet considered to be closest to the sun. But did you know that in the 1800s, it was believed that there was another planet, Vulcan, that existed between Mercury and the sun? However, it was considered too close to the sun to be observable in the sun's glare. In fact, in esoteric astrology, the hypothetical Vulcan is still included in astrological analysis, and it's an absolutely fascinating point in the sky. So my point being here is that there are some people who consider that Mercury is not the closest planet to the sun. But in this series, we'll be looking at current astronomical concepts. And that means Mercury is the messenger of the gods, considered to be the closest to the sun, our main luminary in the sky. Let's look at the astronomy of Mercury. Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system. As we've just established, it's also the closest planet to the sun. But even though it is near to the sun, it is not the hottest planet. Would you believe that because Mercury has no atmosphere at all, it has the most variable temperatures of any planet because it cannot retain any heat from the sun? You know, nighttime temperatures on Mercury can get as cold as minus 173 degrees Celsius, or that's minus 280 degrees Fahrenheit. While in the daytime, Mercury is hotter than your oven. It gets to a stinking 427 degrees Celsius. That's 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Amazing. What a variance. Now, Mercury also takes 87 Earth days to orbit the sun. Earth only takes 365. So it's a very fast little planet. It spins around the sun really, really quickly. Mercury is made of rocks covered in crater holes, just like the moon is. And this tells us that it's been hit many times in the past by comets and meteors. They slammed into little Mercury very hard, as once again, Mercury has no atmosphere to buffer them or slow the comets down. So the impact was very visible, or is very visible, on Mercury's surface. Billions of years ago, Mercury was also volcanically active, and this has also made its splotchy surface full of volcanoes and vents and craters as well. Let's look at the mythology of Mercury. You know, people have known that Mercury as a body in the sky has existed since as long ago as 1400 years BC. You know, in ancient Babylon, they called Mercury Nabu. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Nabu. And Nabu was the god in charge of writing, thinking, and wisdom. He would write down on a tablet the fated destiny of each person. Nabu wore a cap with horns and rode on a winged dragon named Sirush. Now, it was the Romans who worshipped the god that was named Mercury, and he was the god connected to business and making money, communicating and giving messages. He was also associated with traveling and was a guide for souls going to the underworld. There's a lot of mythology about Mercury knowing what's going on in the underworld because he was the god that traversed the pathway to the underworld. He had a special temple built for him in 495 BC and a celebration on the 15th of May called Mercurialia. In ancient Greece, Mercury was known as Hermes, the youngest of all the Greek gods. Hermes liked to trick people. He was a bit of a prankster and a fun lover, a lot like Loki in the Norse mythology. He also wore winged shoes and a winged hat. He had a rooster for a pet and was referred to as the messenger of the gods. The Egyptians also worshipped a god who was named Thoth, and just like Mercury and Hermes, he was the god of wisdom and writing and science and magic and art. He was also the god of judgment and the dead. Thoth had the body of a human with the head of an ibis bird. He was the secretary and counselor to the Egyptian sun god Ra, a record keeper this time, not just a messenger of the gods. Now, what about the astrology of Mercury? In astrology, Mercury tells us about how we learn, what we tend to think about, how we will tend to speak and communicate. Mercury also represents business and trade, brothers and sisters, and is also the planet of being young and playful. Where Mercury sits in our astrology chart, the map of the sky at the moment we were born, will tell us so much about how we're going to be playful, how we will think, how we will speak, and how we're going to learn best in life. Now, your Mercury might say that you will learn best through being around other people. Or maybe your Mercury position might say that you will learn best through being very quiet and reading a lot. Or maybe by experimenting and doing things that are very out of the ordinary. There are so many ways we can learn, and Mercury shows us how we can best do that. In astrology, Mercury is also a very talented planet. It tells us about our skills and our abilities. If Mercury is in Virgo, for example, it might tell us that we might find that we're very good at cooking. If Mercury is in the sign of Cancer, we might have an amazing imagination and create fascinating stories. Perhaps our Mercury is in the sign of Gemini, and that might make us a very funny person indeed. Wherever Mercury sits can also show us what our brothers and our sisters might be like. For example, if Mercury is in the zodiac sign of Aries, our siblings might be very competitive and like to play games. Or in the sign of Aquarius, our brothers and sisters might be very quirky and unusual and super smart. Mercury is a planet that is in charge of two star signs known as Gemini and Virgo. These two signs are all about being very clever and practical with your hands or practical with your mind or both. Mercury in astrology is also the playful jester, a jokester. He is clever and bright. He is a young person, a youthful energy, and all of us have a little bit of Mercury in our heart somewhere. Everyone is different in the way they learn, think, talk, and play. And Mercury teaches us to love the different ways people think and communicate, and to love our own unique way of thinking and talking and communicating as well. In what ways are you talented? How do you learn best? What things do you think about the most? This is all reflective of your Mercury placement. Your Mercury placement gives the reason for the answers you just gave to those questions I asked you, and so much more. And now, without any further ado, we're going to look at what Mercury brings to us or gives to our lives through his placement in each of the houses of the horoscope. So join with me now. We're going to dive into a little piece from the Royal Stars Academy that describes Mercury in all the different houses.
Mercury in the 4th house. With this placement, you can be involved in the media, teaching and instructing, writing and blogging, but to do with 4th house things, domestic things, family life, home decoration, renovation, property development, all those sorts of things. You'll talk a lot as a parent with your children, and you'll be a really good educator of your children with Mercury here. A teacher of little children is often seen with Mercury in the 4th house. You might also be very good with contracts and documents, with paperwork. That's all Mercury stuff that's connected to land, property transactions, town planning, community development, all that sort of thing. Patriotism will feature in your communications in some way as well, because 4th house is it's connected to Cancer, it's connected to the moon, there's patriotism there. Mercury can make you a wonderful property manager when he's in the 4th house, or a housekeeper, or a garden administrator, or even a garden worker. Remember, Mercury is to use the hands in the house of gardening, 4th house. So being a good gardener. Maybe you're a greenskeeper or something like that, managing lawns at a golf course or something. There would have been a lot of communication in your early home environment. The use of the phone, the use of a computer, a laptop, computer games, apps and iPads and things like that would have probably featured a lot in the early childhood with Mercury here. It's a very bonding placement when it comes you will bond with your children, I should phrase this as. You'll bond with your children through talking with them, sharing with them, communicating with them. To feel more peaceful and more settled in life, which is a 4th house theme, you will need to take time to read, to spend time with friends, talking and chatting, to be able to research information freely, to be social in your home, to use social gadgets and to connect, to use social gadgets to connect with people, and also taking time to journal. Those are, if you're feeling like life's out of control, and you've got this placement, they're the things you should be pursuing to help balance you again. Now, when you have your own home and family, communication, as I've already alluded to, will be your main means of bonding with your children, but also with your, with your friends in your home, talking and communicating with your friends in your home. Hence that need for socialization in the home, hospitality, in other words, having friends around for lunch or coffee and that kind of stuff. Your house will tend to be decorated with mercurial things as well, maybe with books or some items from the media. Maybe you've got film posters or something like that up on the wall. Games, lots of games in your home. Things that are humorous for you, maybe a funny little quote on the wall, that kind of stuff. You might also, with Mercury in the 4th house, you might live near a library or a school, or in a city area where there's not a main capital city, but like a provincial city where there's a lot of action. There's lots going on, lots of action. You're always busy. You're at the center of things, center of the news, so to speak. That's where you'll want to live, in a very busy place. Your curiosity will really flourish after your 40s. Remember, 4th house is the house of the second stage of life. And so after your 40s, your curiosity with Mercury here will really step up. You'll become more mentally alert after your 40s, probably playing more games, more keen to learn something new. So enjoy that energy. That's a gift. 4th house is also the 10th house from the 7th. So your spouse can have a lot of involvement in mercurial things as well, or be very socially oriented. They may possibly even have their own business. You can also have a business that perhaps operates from home with Mercury here. Mercury is the planet that rules small business, and here in the house, in the realm of home, you might be running a business out of your home at some stage in life. Alternatively, you might have small business focused on 4th house things. A small business of domestic cleaning, or a small business to do with hospitality, or to do with real estate, or property development, or home design, or farming. Now, also the 4th house has to do with our mother, and your mother might have been involved in mercurial things as well. She might have been involved in advertising, marketing, writing, speaking, teaching. She might have just been an avid reader, or she might have been very social and had quite a big social network, or she was probably very involved in some sort of community, 4th house, social activities. And finally, on the 4th house, you yourself might be very interested in reading and researching about your roots, your heritage, your history, and the lineage that you come from.